Attention denizens of planet Earth.
Broadcasting from Carbondale in Southern Illinois' premier comic shop. And now your host, superlative shaman of comic book knowledge, Dan Brown. Flash the match signal in case of emergency for your host with the most on his mind, Matt Morton. Watch out, criminals. There's nothing funny to him about truth, justice, and the American way. It's Commander Harris himself, Scott Reed. And tuning in from the far reaches of no man's land, the mad scientist dream leader, Mike Ho. This is Campus Comics Cast.
Hey everybody, welcome to the latest episode of the Campus Comics Cast. As we have been lately, we're all sort of recording from our homes and over Skype and wherever we are right now. We're still not recording from the store, but the store is open right now at 816 East Main Street in Carbondale, Suite B. And if you want to come by, pick up some books, we are getting new books in right now. We just ask everybody to kind of bear with us right now because the distribution thing is still kind of going crazy. We're getting DC switching over to a new distributor and a few more distributors, as we just found out, too, for merchandise and different things. So, you know, this is coming at us the same time as everybody else. So just try to be patient with us right now while we, get everything back on track. And I'm Dan. I'm there on most Saturdays, and with me this time are
Scott Reed
and Mike Atchison.
So I think we're going to start off tonight by talking. We got some Batman movie news, and part of it, some of it's good, some of it's bad. I guess we'll just start with the sort of bad news right now. Is Joel Schumacher, the director of Batman Forever and Batman and Robin, just passed the other day. Apparently, he had a battle with cancer over the last year or so. Again, 80 years old, same age as Denny O'Neil, that just passed the other day too. Both born 1939, same year Batman came out. So we're losing some of the older creatives and stuff.
Well, that's two. There's always come in threes. So
yeah, hope not. But yeah we'll see. So yeah, again, for our purposes, we're talking about him because he directed the Batman movies. He did a lot of other stuff. He had a pretty big catalog of films he worked on. As far as genre stuff goes, I know there's a lot of people, that were fans of the Lost Boys movie that he did. Mm-hmm. I haven't seen it in a long time, but I really liked Falling Down back when I saw that back in the day. I don't know how well it holds up, but, worked on a lot of different things.
With Michael Douglas, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that was a good one.
Yeah, and just personally, I'll just say this here. I like Batman Forever. I think it's a good movie. I think it gets a worse rap because of Batman and Robin.
Yep.
I'm not going to defend that movie.
No.
But I think a lot of people, it shades their opinions on Batman Forever after that movie came out.
Now, that was the Val Kilmer one, right? Batman
yeah, that was
Forever.
the Val Kilmer one.
Yeah, I thought that one was pretty good.
And again, I think it's a thing of, had they gone in a different direction for the next movie, it would just be, oh, there's that one kind of tonally weird one in there, it's a little brighter than the Tim Burton films. But again, I think because of what came after with Batman and Robin, and again, Joel Schumacher has basically apologized for that movie at one point. I know the Batman and Robin commentary is pretty apologetic in tone, but I don't think he quite comes out in that commentary and apologizes or anything like that. But again, I think, don't dismiss Batman Forever because of Batman and Robin. And I know even back then, Schumacher was talking about doing year one after that. And that's kind of the take they did with Christopher Nolan with Batman Begins, a few years later. So, he knew they needed to course correct after that. Yep. And there was also I don't know if there's ever a script for it, but there was an idea for the next one after Batman and Robin to be like, I think we might have been talking about this before Batman and Robin even came out, was a film, I think it was called Batman Triumphant, which there was talk of the villains being Harley Quinn and Scarecrow. And, again, we're talking, 1997. And I think the idea was seeing about Madonna playing Harley Quinn and Jack Nicholson maybe coming back in a flashback or a dream sequence or something as Joker in that one. And then there was talk of Howard Stern playing the Scarecrow back then. So, yeah, another movie we never got.
And it probably would have been terrible based on the casting.
Well, it didn't happen after Batman and Robin, so there's that. In some better news, and kind of going back to the 90s Batman stuff, there is a lot of rumors of Michael Keaton coming back to reprise his role as Batman in a Flash film, and maybe in some more of the DC Universe movies, as it's kind of being described as a Nick Fury / mentor kind of role. What do you guys think of this?
I think I think they're trying to cram too much into the Flash movie, and if they turn it into Crisis, which is what based on some other news, is what it's starting to sound like, it's just going to confuse too many non-hardcore DC fans, and I think it's just going to cause that series to fall flat on its face, especially now, even if Flash ever gets off the ground, because Ezra Miller's got some, there's some personal problems for him outside with some, like there was some video or something of him assaulting a woman. I don't know whatever came out of that.
Yeah, I never did hear.
A while back. So I mean, there's already, that's got a strike against it, and I just feel like if they, if they try to cram too much, Michael Keaton into this film as if he were Bruce Wayne from the Tim Burton Batman movies, that's just going to be a huge mistake.
Well, I think
sounds cool, but yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'll say this: I'm all for Michael Keaton Batman.
Mm-hmm.
That's what got me into everything here. I'll take that any day. I don't know if this is the best place for it. And again, they've been talking about Flashpoint as sort of the basis of this movie for a long time. So I could see this being a thing of like that, where they use this to kind of course correct, the series they've kind of been talking about. I don't know if that's the way to do it necessarily. I don't know. I don't know if they were looking at, maybe stuff like Into the Spider-Verse or the CW's Crisis miniseries, crossover series they did with their shows, if they think that's something viable now for them. I don't know.
Well, I'll say this, that the Flash sequence in the CW Crisis on Infinite Earths, where Ezra Miller appeared as a alternate version of the Flash, was probably the best scene in that entire 5-part or whatever, how many parts it was, crossover. I do kind of have the same concerns as you, Scott, about maybe this is jamming too much into it, but it's hard to say. Just adding him as some context as an alternate version, or I'm for it. I'm not even, to be honest, until I heard this news, I wasn't even sure there was going to be a Flash movie.
Well, I think that's...
previous conflicts with Ezra Miller and wanting his script and then getting it shot down, etc.
This is getting a pretty positive review from people online, so I'm like, this might be the thing that gets the Flash movie made.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? This may make people take notice, because they've been talking about a Flash movie since before Justice League. You know what I mean? And I mean, they were talking about several movies that have never seen the light of day since. But, this might be the thing that gets them going on that. If people get really hyped up for this.
Yeah, I'm not excited about Ezra Miller as the Flash to begin with, because he was not good in Justice League. And then, I know you thought that was the coolest scene in the CW Crisis. I thought that was one of the worst scenes in CW Crisis, because you have the two goofball Barry Allens, touching and fondling each other's suit and talking about the differences. I just thought that was a terrible scene. So, sorry. It's like, I didn't need that. That was just a throwaway scene that didn't add anything to the story. So
anything that's different than the usual soap opera crap, I'm for. Jeez. I like Ezra Miller. I don't think he's he's not the Barry Allen I remember, but we're so far past that it doesn't matter. He's more of a Wally West, I think. But I don't know. I do worry, like you said, jamming too much in like the Green Lantern movie. That's going to be an issue. But surely they've learned their lesson by now. I know, famous last words, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I think the other thing to remember too is Michael Keaton is 68 years old right now, like today. We're not getting him in another rubber Batman suit.
No.
That's not going to happen.
Right.
I think if anything, I mean, a lot of people are kind of making assumptions about Batman Beyond and saying maybe he's just kind of like old man Bruce, like that. I think there's a possibility. I think part of it though is Warner Brothers, if they're bringing him back, they're going to want him as Batman. in some degree. And I think maybe we get like some kind of armored suit for him. Maybe they pull some kind of Robert Downey Jr. Iron Man thing with it where he doesn't necessarily have to suit up, in something like this again. But again, I can't see him, when you hear about like those suits back from like the early 90s and, even till today, it's like these things sound super uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And they just kind of take a toll on the actors. I can't see him jumping into another, superhero suit at this point like that.
Well, I'm also excited about the idea of Michael Keaton being in that movie, just because it's going to bring the quality of the acting up multiple notches.
I would hope so.
And I don't have to see him in a Batman suit. I'm perfectly fine with him just playing Bruce Wayne in that movie. But I mean, it's going to take a big pull to bring up, Ezra Miller's acting as far as I'm concerned.
So Dan, you should know this. How old is Samuel L. Jackson?
Older than you think.
That's what I thought. So,
he's up there, but again, he's not putting on a Batman suit.
No, but he's been the common thread in a whole lot of Marvel movies.
Yeah.
Not just sitting and
71.
sitting on his hands.
So older than Michael Keaton.
Yeah.
But again, they started those about 12 years ago too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's right. So.
But supposedly if Flashpoint is the basis for this movie, I thought Flashpoint, despite what it resulted in the New 52, which I just despise, Flashpoint in and of itself, I thought was a pretty good story.
I was on board Flashpoint until they shoehorned in the New 52 reboot with it. I think it would be a much better story had it been able to wrap up the way it was supposed to, whatever that was, we don't know. It just led into the next thing, presumably. The next thing in this so happened to be the New 52, which I'm fine with the New 52. I'm okay with that stuff for the most part. But I just feel like it should have been like its own standalone story. And we didn't need, that's my whole conspiracy theories about the New 52 anyway. We're just, where it was all rushed and everything. And again, I think that was something that came down while they were working on the series. It's like, well, we can reboot it here kind of thing.
I really feel like only like the last couple of pages of the last issue were really all it took for them to move that into New 52. They just had that closing scene with Flash and Batman, where they're talking about, some things that happened. They show their new costumes and that kind of is all that I think was added in. There may have been some other stuff. I think that was the focus of what was added in to make it the New 52.
But again, we won't know. You know what I mean? That kind of thing.
Yeah, we'll never know.
Especially while Jeff Johns is still working there.
Yeah.
So kind of keeping up with Flashpoint, though, too, is there's another rumor that Jeffrey Dean Morgan, who played Bruce Wayne in Batman v Superman, might be coming back as...
one scene, right? Just the one scene? Yeah, the one scene.
That he might be coming back as Thomas Wayne in this and playing Flashpoint Batman. Now, again, this is probably a little more dubious. This might just be fans kind of wanting that kind of thing. But again, I think it'd be a good choice if you're going to have that character. I don't really want to see Michael Keaton as a, gun-wielding Batman. But I could see Jeffrey Dean Morgan pulling that off,
And he's a solid actor.
Yeah.
So that's good.
And he's got recognizability. I mean, people will recognize him. Yeah.
So, yeah.
Wow, he's a young 54. Nice.
Yeah. See, Mike could have been a movie star.
Yep.
So the other kind of casting rumor going around, and again, who knows, this is probably just wishful thinking on somebody's part, is that they're talking about bringing in Tim Drake into these movies, and one of the names they're throwing around for Tim Drake is Tom Holland, who is the current Spider-Man. I think at best this is Warner Brothers execs just throwing out names on a list. I can't really picture this happening. I'd love to see a live-action Tim Drake. We've never gotten that. That's my Robin. I'm all for him being in one of these movies. I just can't picture Tom Holland in that part, at this point.
I think he's too locked up with Sony that he couldn't do it even if he wanted to.
Yeah, I can't imagine. And again, we were, talking before, before we start recording, he's also attached to this Uncharted movie if it ever gets going. That's like another franchise part for him, in theory. So, yeah, I can't see him as Robin. Is there anything else on all this stuff you guys wanted to add into, or
I don't have anything to add onto that.
Stuff. So going from Batman
to Batman,
we're gonna continue talking about Batman: The Adventures Continue that we've talked about before on here. So this time we're going to be going over chapters 3 and 4 of the digital book,
which is issue 2 when the physical print one hits the stands. Yeah. Do we know what the release date is for that?
I do not. And again, right now with the DC distribution, I'd hate to throw out a date right now, just because it might, they're getting a new distributor in like 2 weeks. So I'd be hesitant to kind of throw that out right now.
Well, eventually it will be just the second issue. So we ready to go on this?
I think so.
All right. So also written by Alan Burnett and Paul Dini, art by Ty Templeton. That was the same as the first 2 digital ones, right? Yeah. Mm-hmm. So, all right. So our story starts here with you have a very calm Jason Todd basically walking against this panicked crowd.
Well, we assume it's Jason Todd. They still haven't
right. Said it, right?
We all know.
Yeah.
But yeah, as far as people in this world.
Yeah, well, it's like we get that with several characters. They're like, we all know who Deathstroke is, but they're introducing him as a new character, as if we're not supposed to know he's going to end up being a bad guy by the time this is all over.
Right.
So anyway, he ascends to a local rooftop to watch this fight between Batman, Batgirl, and Robin versus Clayface. And Clayface here is upset that there's a new version of a film called Gangbuster, which apparently he has Matt Hagen had the lead role. Now, which version of Clayface is this?
This is
He's actually his second.
Clayface the second? Okay, all right.
But he's also an actor like Basil Carlo, the first Clayface. So this is absolutely the animated series version of Clayface here that we've got.
Okay. So anyway, Jason Todd, still watching from this nearby rooftop, can basically he mentioned that he can sympathize with being replaced. So I think that gives us a little bit of a clue about where this story is heading. So anyway, Clayface splits himself in 2, so he can kind of split up the Bat family here. They got 2 foes to fight instead of just 1. Now you'll have to help me here on this part. So Clayface changes form into Annie. I don't know who Annie is. So
Annie, I can tell you exactly who this is, and I just watched this the other day because of this.
Okay.
So there's an episode called Growing Pains on the new Batman Adventures. Again, the show that this book is based on. Robin comes across a lost amnesiac girl named Annie, who's being hunted by like some thug, some big like mysterious thug who may be her father. We're not really sure. Over the course, Robin befriends this girl. Over the course of the episode, we realize Clayface was trapped. He reformed himself in a sewer after being like lost at sea for a while and kind of reforming. He created Annie and sent her off to make sure it was okay. So she's a construct of Clayface. But when she broke off from him, she became independent and forgot about Clayface, forgot what she was supposed to do, and didn't know what was going on. So it's this sort of touching story where the thug going after her is Clayface, but she can't remember what Clayface is or that she's a part of him or anything. And so over the course of the story, Clayface is trying to get her back because she's a part of him. And, Robin basically gets heartbroken when he realizes, when Clayface takes this part of himself back.
Okay.
But
so that's a deep cut.
It's a deep cut. It's a great episode. I think it's a Paul Dini episode, but I have to double check. But again, this is Clayface playing mind games with Robin at this point, trying to throw him off. And again, Robin isn't having it this time, and freezes her here.
Yeah, so Robin doesn't get fooled, freezes Clayface. Now, at this point, Deathstroke joins the fray, and Quarters, get that? Quarters, because he's already in half, so he has him against a Quarters Clayface. Batman then, rejoins the group with the other defeated half of Clayface. Now, Robin, during this confrontation between Deathstroke and Clayface, actually seems pretty impressed with Deathstroke. I think he says awesome as, Deathstroke kind of flips out of the panel as being impressed by what's going on with that character.
Real quick, as Deathstroke is flipping out of the panel, he jumps onto a moving van from the Farmer Brown farm. This was another episode of the new Batman Adventures that featured a villain called Farmer Brown. and it's not one of the most beloved episodes of the series. It's really, I don't think they ever brought the character back. And this might be the first mention of the character since that cartoon. And it's not one people remember too fondly, but they did do commentary for it on the DVD set, kind of because of that. But again, that's another little Easter egg that they just kind of threw in the background there on this issue.
All right. So you guys got anything else to add to the story at this point before we move on to Batman and
Gordon? I do a couple things. First of all, that splash page, or maybe it's the cover. I never really know which is
the splash
which
page.
Digital. Yeah. Did it evoke anything to you? The design.
Let me look at it again.
The title or like the actual cover?
The actual cover. The actual first panel of art with the
one where Deathstroke's dropping down with the light in the background. Well, if I had to say something, I would say The Thing, but beyond that, no.
Okay, so maybe it's a stretch, but it reminded me of the Dark Knight Returns cover with the lightning bolt striking with the silhouettes of Batman and Superman. Just that's been homaged and mimicked so many times, it's maybe not even worth mentioning, but that's just what struck me. I also, I didn't know who Annie was. I'm glad you explained that, Dan.
Yeah.
And that's good to know. One thing that stuck out to me was that Batman acted like it's the first time he's encountered Deathstroke. And that surprised me. I know this is a different universe.
It is for this series. It is.
In this continuity, this is the first time Batman has met Deathstroke. They've talked about this before. They couldn't use Deathstroke on the animated series because of his name. It was like it was like a standards thing or something where you couldn't have a character named Deathstroke. And then later on the Teen Titans cartoon, a few years later after this,
Slade.
They always called him Slade. They never called him Deathstroke.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So I think that's probably why, for both of those things.
It was at Teen Titans Go to the Movies where they just always really emphasized the Slade, right?
Yeah. Okay, that's all I had.
All right. So we get, I guess, so that we can, to introduce the new reader to a little bit about Deathstroke. You've got Batman and Jim Gordon in Gordon's office, basically kind of going over his background, and then we transition over to Batgirl, basically dispensing with, and here's a chance for Dan to shine again. Roxy Rocket.
Yeah.
All right. So
again, this is another character that was original to the new Batman Adventures. I think they were trying to capture the Harley Quinn lightning in a bottle again with this character. I want to say she showed up on Superman too, maybe. But again, it's one of those characters like, Paul Dini and people associated with the show try to bring back up in the comics and stuff like that. And I'm pretty sure they made an action figure of her with the Batman animated series line.
Wow.
Again, I'm not 100% on that because they made so many of those figures, but I want to say she was. If they have it by now, I'm sure they will after her appearance here in this, because again, that's kind of the whole point of this series, is to expand that action figure line.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, that's where she's from. And again, she's a fun character. I kind of wish they would do more with her, like in the regular continuity and that kind of thing. But she's always just sort of like a cameo character here and there.
I love the name. I love that's a cool character.
And it looks like she's smashing into a soda cola billboard there, which again is the DC kind of version of Coke, in there.
Okay, so anyway, so after Batgirl takes out Roxy Rocket, she finds Deathstroke kind of waiting on her bike. You definitely get the feeling that Slade is trying to recruit the younger Bat family members. So he removes his mask, try to be a little bit more, decrease the level of trust between them. But Barbara doesn't actually seem particularly interested until Deathstroke points out that she's being watched, and then who we suspect, or we should say no, Jason Todd kind of slinks off into the night. Then we've got a several-page scene of Bruce, Alfred, Tim, and Barbara just kind of discussing, what's been going on with all of them, which kind of wraps up with Bruce basically warning them just to be careful until he's able to learn more about what's going on with Deathstroke. So anything else you guys want to add before we get to the final scene of this half of the issue?
There is something I want to add just to kind of poke this bear. So they're in Wayne Manor having breakfast.
Mhm.
Why is Barbara Gordon at Wayne Manor first thing in the morning for breakfast? So again, we've got in Batman Beyond, it's continuity that at one point Bruce and Barbara are a couple.
You're just wrong, Dan.
So are we seeing the beginnings of that here?
Well, Barbara is much older than Tim at this point, so.
I have an observation. I've never seen the Wayne Manor be positioned on a rocky outcrop on what looks like the Gotham Bay. I thought it was in a rural area.
Well, this is more like the new Batman Adventures design, and I think that does part of that carries over to Batman Beyond.
They didn't check with me on all these changes.
Yeah. Well, it was such a weird thing at the time too, because like the show had been canceled, and they'd moved on to Superman, and like now, oh hey, we're bringing it back and we're redesigning the characters and stuff. It really felt like even at the time, like you didn't see that. This is before they brought back Family Guy and stuff like that. You didn't see cartoons kind of being revived like this, or shows in general. And it wasn't, and Bruce, Tim, and them have all spoken to this. We could, they decided they could design things better and more efficiently, for animation. And so that was like the sort of impetus for most of the style changes with this version of the show. But, it is interesting that we got more Batman the Animated Series,
So we wrap up this half of the issue with Deathstroke dropping down into a warehouse, and he dispenses with some what we don't initially realize are just some practice dummies until one of them gets its head blown off, and it's not actually, it's just plastic. Here we're introduced to...
It looks pretty brutal before that.
Exactly, yeah. So we're introduced to Deathstroke's associate here, whose name is Sonny, and Dan, go.
This is a new character. I'm pretty sure.
Okay. Oh, okay. All right. Good.
I think this is the first time for everybody.
No, Sonny appeared in. No, I'm kidding.
I want to say I did hear them speak about this, and that this is the new character. Again, okay. I might be wrong. Let me know if I am. But I think we're all on the same page with this. And again, maybe this is Deathstroke's Harley Quinn or something. They're going to try to get going now. Maybe this becomes animated series punchline by the end of this. Who knows?
So anyway, we now get the backstory about how these two are working together, that they set up Clayface, and that they're ultimately out to get Batman is kind of what it boils down to. And that wraps up the part 3, which is actually part 1 of Mentors for that. So anything else on this issue before we go on to the next part?
No, I liked it.
Oh yeah, no, it's been really good. So
yeah, I mean, it was the part where Tim was so enamored with Deathstroke was sort of predictable, but that's okay. He's a young guy, and Deathstroke's pretty charismatic. So yeah, overall, I liked it a lot.
Yeah, and I feel like that just plays into like this almost being another season of the show. I could definitely see them playing it off like that in like a 22-minute episode. Where you can't get too deep into a story necessarily, but you still have some character development there and that kind of thing. But yeah, I think it's a new thing. It's an interesting thing. Someone trying to take Robin away from Batman like that.
All right, so we're ready to go on to the next part. Yeah. All right. So now I guess the first thing about this one is I was expecting that we were going to get a wrap up of the Deathstroke story here, and we don't get that by the end of the issue. I figured we'd have 2 issues, right, and then 2 issues, and then we had the underlying Jason Todd going through the entire thing. So that doesn't actually happen. But anyway, so this part starts off with Robin being upset that he's been taken out of this fight because of a curfew. So he's got to go home so he can get ready for school. But on his way back to Wayne Manor, I guess he notices that Deathstroke's breaking into basically a bug museum. What is it, the Entomology Pavilion or something like that? So he basically also sneaks into the museum and catches up with Deathstroke, and Deathstroke informs him that he's out there to basically track down Firefly. So Deathstroke then gives Robin kind of a rundown on Firefly's history, what Firefly's done in the past, what happened to him, why he knows that this is where he's going to be at. And then we're greeted with this, loud buzzing noise, and then we get some of these giant, what are they? Well, I guess they're murder hornets, right?
Yeah,
but
that's the first thing I thought of.
Yeah, they're actually what? Giant Asian, I had it written down here someplace. Giant Asian, just hornets. Yeah, Asian giant hornets. But anyway, but before we get into that, before they actually fight the hornets, we transition back to Batman fighting Mad Hatter and his crew. So I guess anything else through that first Deathstroke meeting you guys wanted to talk about?
I just wanted to point out too, Deathstroke is talking to Robin about Firefly. Robin hasn't ran into Firefly because this references an episode called Torch Song, where they brought Firefly into the animated series, and so we have this sort of, on here it's a splash page, but it's probably a half page in the printed book, of Batman fighting Firefly in a sort of black armored suit. This was like a fire retardant suit that he made on that episode, and it sort of it's almost a precursor to the Batman Beyond suit. And again, this is before Batman Beyond, so it's kind of interesting seeing that character, close sort of suit design to that on here.
Mike, you got anything else to add?
Just that I'm very happy that Robin was practicing safe driving wearing a helmet on his motorcycle.
All right, so Batman's fighting Mad Hatter and his crew. Basically, it's just kind of a traditional, bat thumping. And as he finishes the battle, he catches this glimpse of light. So he knows that he's being watched. Now, I guess the thing to really point out here as part of this is that Batman says him, as if he knows exactly who it is that is watching him, and he knows that he only has 30 seconds to make it to this rooftop if he wants to actually catch up with him. And of course, it takes him 33 seconds. So Jason Todd is able to escape before Batman can arrive on the roof. Back to Robin and Deathstroke, they're able to dispense of the murder hornets just as Firefly appears, and they fight for a bit. And then we end up with that being kind of the cliffhanger, where we're introduced to the new ability that Firefly has added to his suit. So we're at least going to get one more issue, and I would assume we're going to get two more issues that involve Deathstroke moving forward, but I don't know that for sure. So what else about these two issues for you guys?
Well, I wanted to jump back to the Mad Hatter fight real quick.
Sure.
Because here we've got sort of the animated version of Mad Hatter and his Wonderland gang. There's another character in here, though, called the Carpenter, which is the girl that Batman is kicking with the crowbar. And that's a character that Paul Dini introduced in Detective Comics during his run. And she is a character that sort of builds villain hideouts and that kind of thing. It's come up in the book a few times, but I'm pretty sure this is the first time she's been in anything like animated series. And again, she fits in well with this group, so I'm sure that's why she's in there. And Paul Dini probably just wanted to throw the character in there because he created her. But again, it's kind of a cool thing seeing that character in here. Let's try to think. Oh, and so that in the museum where they realize they need to hit the Hornets with foam, there's a shot with Robin standing with his cape, and then Deathstroke sitting next to him with his fist smoking. And I can't figure out why his fist is smoking.
Well, I thought it was because he says there that there needs to be a more permanent solution. So I thought he just kind of burned the Hornets because everything's smoking. So I thought he, burned them out somehow.
Yeah, that's kind of what I thought too.
With his hand?
Well, I guess so. Yeah. I mean, that would be a new power for him. So I guess that doesn't necessarily make a whole lot of sense, but
I mean, it makes as much sense as anything I can figure out. Because we don't see what he's doing that leads to that.
No.
And again, this is the art that is used on the title page too.
Mm-hmm. Right.
So I'm not really sure what he did here though.
But I don't know what else would cause his hand to be smoking other than
exactly.
He did something with fire.
He had some pyrotechnic, I didn't think it was a power. I just thought it was some sort of
right. But I can't, I kind of looked through the story again with that, and I can't figure out what that is directly. But again, not that big a deal. Maybe it's something that'll happen in the next chapter. We'll find out. So yeah. But yeah, I think that's it for me on this one.
Yeah, so still really solid storytelling. This is a great for the younger person for sure who just wants a Batman story. If you want your Batman story unencumbered by, well, I guess there's a whole lot more going on with with continuity than what you realize, but
again,
a little less continuity.
Or if you just want more animated series,
mm-hmm.
That's the other part of that.
Yeah, so I'm definitely enjoying it. So. And I know, let's see, at least the issue 5 is available digitally. So,
yeah, I liked how they made Firefly a little bit more of a dangerous villain. His earlier appearances, he goes way back to 1952. He wasn't. He just never seemed to be that dangerous. But they really amped it up in recent years with his pyrotechnics and explosives and things like that. And that last scene where he's using the that fire that comes from his mouth, a la the Demon. I thought that was pretty cool.
Yeah, no, this is definitely the Chuck Dixon, Graham Nolan version of Firefly, not the original incarnation.
Yep.
But I did like too where he was in an accident and his face was kind of scarred up now too. Again, like how he is in the comic books now. So sort of a cool thing to throw in there. So moving on from that, are we ready to talk about another type of vigilante, which is Adrian Chase vigilante? So we're
ready to go on.
Okay, we're going to be talking about issues 2 and 3 of his monthly series from the 80s. We talked about his first appearance in New Teen Titans Annual #2 and Vigilante #1 last time we did this. Mm-hmm. So we're moving on to this now. Issue 2, Guilt, by Marv Wolfman, Keith Pollard, and Pablo Marcos. Just a nice kind of action cover here with by Keith Pollard of Vigilante struggling against the villain of this issue. I just noticed, too, reading this one, I'm not sure what it is, but it's Keith Pollard's signature really reminds me of Brian Boland's. And again, just more of a typeset-looking font. Now, his is all lowercase, Boland's is uppercase, but it's just that real sort of matter-of-fact-looking font to me. I think it's probably what made me think of that.
Yeah, it's a good observation.
Yeah, and I'm not saying like he's copying Boland's signature or anything like that. It's just a similar sort of thing, which, you don't see very much. So the story starts out in a flashback of Adrian Chase back when he was still DA prosecuting this man.
Cord.
Yeah, what was his first name? Leonard Cord. And again, spelled with a K. So, yeah, it could be. And so this is a guy who attacked a nun, is kind of the quick way of saying this, and is found guilty. We then see Chase meeting with his family, who, again, in current timeline is deceased, having dinner at his father's house. His dad is giving him a hard time. And then it sort of transitions into the current timeline where now this is after Chase has lost his family and his father's wanting him to join his firm and tells him he needs to quit moping over the loss of his family and that sort of thing, kind of being kind of harsh with him. But again, not realizing what Adrian's really up to, which we as the reader know is he is vigilante, taking down these criminals that, are, getting off on technicalities and that sort of thing with the criminal justice system. And as Chase leaves, he's picked up by JJ, a member of the team, where they were informed that Cord is got his conviction overturned and is now free. And then immediately up on the next page, we have Vigilante on his motorcycle, not using a helmet like Robin was smart enough to in Batman, but immediately going after Cord. And then we see Cord sort of dealing with his day-to-day life now as a free man, trying to get a job. No one wants to work with him.
Yeah, jumping back just a little bit, because during that court proceedings with Cord, I don't think he ever said that the things that he had been accused of in his past, that he wasn't guilty of those things, but he said this crime, it wasn't him. He'd never hurt a sister. Right. That's how he described it, right?
And, they are saying, they're listing, what he's doing here, and they said he sodomized and brutalized her and left her for dead. Again, this is not a code book. I don't think we brought that up before. But yeah, there is no comics code on this book back then. So they're getting some pretty rough stuff here. So then, Cord, no one wants to work with him. His mother's getting harassed at his home where he has to live now. She's saying she has to move. And then Vigilante shows up let him know that he's taking him down. They fight, in the house. They kind of wreck the place.
Yeah, big time.
And again, this is just his elderly mother's home. Cord comes at him with, I assume this is some sort of chainsaw. It looks like an electric knife, though.
I think
it's a reciprocating saw.
Okay.
Or a trimmer.
I was gonna say it's a hedge trimmer.
Okay.
Like a hedge trimmer.
But that's not exactly as dangerous as a reciprocating saw. I mean,
No.
it might hurt, but it's not gonna cut your head off.
Yeah, well, I think he was just using whatever he could get his hands on, because he used a rake, he used the hedge trimmer, he used his fist, just whatever, a knife. I mean, anything he could pick up.
It's like being attacked by a weed eater. I mean, it's like, whoa.
Yeah.
Don't come at me with that.
Hey, it's not going to feel good, regardless.
Yeah, no, we need to feel good. So then we've got sort of Vigilante just laying into him. We've got this 7-panel sequence here. And in the background, we have Vigilante's head in this sort of, different color here.
I did notice it this time.
Yeah, kind of evoking what we saw in New Teen Titans Annual number 2.
Mm-hmm.
But then JJ shows up to stop Adrian and tells him that Cord actually is innocent and that there was another attacker. And they found out it was the son of the Algerian ambassador, who is free because of diplomatic immunity, because this is the 80s. And all the foreign bad guys got away with diplomatic immunity back then. And so then Adrian realizes, oh, we trashed this woman's house. This guy's innocent. I tried to prosecute him back in the day. It's this whole thing. And so he's really kind of questioning what he's doing at this point. He tells this team that he's done. He's packing it in. He's going back to the law. He takes up with his father's firm, where basically they're defending guilty clients that are just rich and can pay for them to get them off. And, eventually this starts to eat at him. And he, at the end of the issue decides, no, I'm back. He's going to be Vigilante now.
But he's going to be more careful about it.
Yeah. Second, this is one of the things that really kind of interested me in this series was here we are, the second issue, and he's already questioning what he's doing. This isn't Punisher.
No.
That has an unwavering sense of what he's doing that, is right. He is really, he found out that he's wrong, and he's having to deal with that in this issue. And again, he kind of wanders and, goes back to being a lawyer and that kind of thing. But I think this is a really intriguing take on this character. But yeah, I'm surprised, they did name the villain Cord. Because, there is Ted Cord. I don't know, was he in the DC universe?
No,
I think it's right before
the acquisition of, this predates the acquisition of the Charlton character.
So, but again, on page 3, still during the trial, they call him Cord again, but it's spelled with a C.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I
spot, but it's a K the rest of the time.
I didn't notice that it changed from a C to a K the rest of the way through.
The judge misspells it.
It's real quick. But it reminded me of Two-Face originally was Harvey Kent back in the day, and they changed it so there wouldn't be a confusion with Clark Kent. They didn't want people to think Superman and Two-Face were related or something. So it's been Harvey Dent ever since then.
I didn't know.
Yeah. Again, no kills in this issue. Vigilante doesn't actually kill anyone over the course of this, issue. Let's see. So, we have the Algerian embassy instead of the Albanian, I'm assuming.
Yeah, probably.
This was sort of a regular thing in comics back then. They didn't necessarily name names. Again, are you going to upset Albania? This comic, I've struggled with that.
Hey, look what happened with the interview in Sony. So maybe they were smart to not name names.
Well, I think the easier line to draw is the Mafia in New York back in the day. And, comic producers didn't want to upset anybody. That's why we got the Magia in Marvel Comics. Where that was a real thing for them. Dealing with those kind of people. But yeah, again, I think this is a really good issue. Again, we don't have a letters column yet in this, so the last page is sort of Marv Wolfman kind of talking about the creation of the character and kind of what his goals are. Me and Mike were talking before we started recording, and I think there's a big spoiler for the series in here if you know what to look for. But yeah, we don't want to get into that.
Yeah, I found that the Q&A was interesting that the Vigilante was taking quite a few hits from the readership early on. Yeah.
Well, again, what he's addressing are some of the same sort of preconceived ideas I had about the character too.
Yeah.
Where it's like, okay, this is like a Death Wish, Punisher, Vigilante kind of anti-hero character. And, they specifically call out saying it's not Death Wish, but in this next issue, we're going to see something that's very Death Wish. So, take that for what you will.
So are you ready to move on to 3?
Anybody else have anything else about 2?
Nope.
That's all I got.
Yeah. Oh, I just want to point out, too, the opening splash page is the sort of Steve Ditko Spider-Man Peter Parker thing where we have Adrian Chase on one half and then the other half of the face is Vigilante. Even though this is a flashback to a court case before he was Vigilante.
It sort of reminded me that not so much the image, but what he said reminded me of the opening scene from a Dragnet TV show. It's just preaching basically to the viewers of what he's doing and setting the scene. So that's what it reminded me of. We ready for Vigilante number 3?
I think so.
Yes.
All right. So I thought this cover was outstanding. This basically a face-off between Vigilante and Cyborg, and I'd almost really forgotten just how great of a design the original was for Cyborg's. I won't say uniform; it's just him. It's much more human than what his recent iterations show him. Almost completely cybernetic. So that just reminded me of just how great that was. In the opening scene, we have Cyborg and some guy named Stryker, of course with a Y, and like Dan says, because it's the 80s, handcuffed together while a gunman tries to shoot them. Of course, his gunman is Vigilante up in the trees, and he ends up taking out Stryker with a shot to the shoulder. We learn that Stryker is a rapist and a murderer who got off with a minor sentence, which makes him a prime target for Vigilante. In a flashback, we see that the Titans are talking to Captain Hall, who kind of explains the background to it. That the Titans were transporting Stryker for his crimes to Attica Prison, but didn't quite make it. So this brings us to the present and the pursuit by a Vigilante. You guys have anything to add at that point?
Well, you kind of went short on his list of crimes because there was drug trafficking, prostitution, white slavery, child pornography, rape, and murder, right?
He's a busy guy.
Yeah, and what got him off is that they had an improperly signed search warrant. That's how he managed to avoid all that. Yeah. And then what they get him on is an unlicensed handgun, so he gets like 1 year in jail. Yeah. So
so back to one of his, the court case that he gets thrown out of on that one is they show this attack of this guy. Is it his wife, I think?
Yes.
So
girlfriend, fiance. They were supposed to get married.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
So after the attack, she's shown in a wheelchair, sort of non-responsive, sort of catatonic. And again, this is the Death Wish reference I was talking about. Charles Bronson's daughter is catatonic after the attack in Death Wish. And so, I mean, this is pretty much a straight-up plot point from that movie. And again, it's a quick, almost throwaway thing. But you're telling me this isn't Death Wish, and we've got something very specific in there. And again, we're, 8 years later maybe or something like that from when Death Wish was released. I don't know that this would necessarily be in the public consciousness back then, something that specific for a movie that had been out of theaters for so long, and that sort of thing. But it's in there. Also, we got a weird line from Chase at this point where he says, "I didn't understand JJ's grief then." Why wouldn't you understand his grief?
Because he hadn't lost his family yet. So
yeah, I know, but still, I mean, I think you could sympathize with your friend, right? And again, now this is JJ from his team, right?
That is correct. I had to read. It wasn't until the second time I read this that I realized.
It took me a while too, and I think it's maybe because I don't think he has a stash at first either, does he?
Yeah, and you don't see him in a suit ever, you know, in the,
But it makes the end of the story, the later on the story, very confusing if you don't get that.
Yeah.
But again, this is where JJ comes from, in Vigilante's story.
Right. Well, after the Titans sort of give the backstory in this flashback, we're back to Cyborg and Stryker trying to avoid Vigilante's shooting spree. And in a very cool scene, Cyborg throws a huge log at Vigilante, just what would probably have killed a normal person.
Yes, this should be the end of the book right here.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah. So regardless, he survived, and after I counted a 4-page battle. Okay, this is the second story in a row that I've summarized that had several pages of a battle. It was a pretty good battle too between Vigilante and Cyborg. Cyborg finally wins and pulls the mask off of him and discovers that he is Chase. Vigilante is able to escape, and in a somewhat redeeming scene, he catches up with Stryker, who is in an attempt, I guess, to just get out of the area, is holding an elderly couple hostage. At this point, Stryker, regardless of his guilt or innocence in the previous crimes, he's digging himself a pretty deep hole. So he considers Vigilante considers shooting Stryker in cold blood, but decides against it. Right about the time that Cyborg shows up, Cyborg again tries to apprehend him, and Vigilante this time shoots Cyborg in the shoulder and escapes again. And the Titans show up and rescue Vic. That brings us to the final scene. You guys have anything in that mid story scene?
Well, I just noticed that Stryker here is spelled with an I instead of a Y.
That was your turn to pick up on something. Yeah. I didn't know that.
on the top of page 20, it's story page 21. It's Stryker with an I. And I'll just go ahead and throw this in there. Whenever I first saw Stryker, I thought I was reading a Marvel comic for just a second, because you also have William Stryker, who's part of the whole X-Men mutant stuff that's going on. So I think it's William Stryker. Maybe it's a different first name, but
all I know is the DC don't know what they were missing out on. They could have hired me as their proofreader, and this would not have happened.
Well, the other part of that too is at the end of this issue, Marv Wolfman talks about a gap in between issues 1 and 2. So apparently there was a month they missed trying to keep everything on schedule. So I feel like they're probably getting kind of rushed at this point too in the production of this book. Back on page 6, again, this is kind of the first thing that stood out to me as far as the JJ storyline, is they say they're going after Stryker, and JJ jumps up and taps his heels like a leprechaun. He's so excited about this. And at first read of that, I'm like, well, why is he so pumped about this guy? But again, it goes back to the attack, and not realizing that was him at first. The Cyborg and Vigilante fight, we're seeing it sort of out of sequence. They're kind of Tarantinoing this or something. So I'd have to go through it again almost to figure out the chronology of this and where everything's happening. I don't think it's that big a deal. It's a fight scene, so you get the point. But I feel like there could have been a more effective way of doing that just throughout the course of the issue.
Well, I think they were just constantly, 2 step forwards, 1 step back, 2 step forwards, 1 step back, because we start in the middle of them running away, and then they back up to what was happening beforehand, how they got to this situation. Then they show some more of the fight. Then they back up to how Vigilante, took out the car and how they fought initially before they get into the actual, current fight. So it's just like, it's just a little different.
Yeah, but with that and the JJ thing, it's just, trying to keep track of what's going on. And then we got, Vigilante giving Cyborg the low blow, after he gets the tree thrown at him. So I can kind of forgive that. But then, again, he shoots him in the shoulder later. So it's like, what are you doing here? But again, Vigilante lets Stryker live, but he, records him basically confessing to his crimes. Whether or not that's admissible is called into question. There was something else I wanted to bring up.
Had you finished your synopsis yet, Mike, or did you still have a little bit left to go on that?
Just a little bit. It's more commentary than it is synopsis, though.
Oh, okay. All right.
Well, what is that?
Just that, I mean, like you said, we're in the final scene, and that's just basically the last page and a half of the book. And yeah, I mean, they're putting a tape recorder in front, or they're trying to record some sort of evidence to use against him, and they think that, well, this will keep him in prison more than just 1 year. Like I said earlier, even though he may not have been guilty of the other crimes, he did dig himself a pretty big hole. And I'll be honest, this isn't too far off the mark of some real cases I've seen, and it's just for the story's sake, they had to build in both redeeming features to it, or to this character, and that he was still sort of a bad guy, to kind of justify Adrian's actions almost. And I'll be honest, I'm not, after Cyborg gets to the hospital and all the Titans are there, and he gets a get well card from Adrian Chase, saying he's sorry.
Yeah,
I'm sorry. I don't care if either one of you shot me and you just sent me a card saying you're sorry. I don't know if I get over it that quickly.
I don't know. I feel like that's a pretty pimp move, Mike. I think I'm all for Adrian in that choice.
Well, Mike, I think you're confusing the bad guy here in issue 3 with the bad guy in issue 2. Because Cord was in issue 2, and he's the one that hadn't committed the one crime that he was actually being punished for. And here in issue 3, we got Stryker, and there's not supposed to be anything redeeming about this guy. I mean, this guy is bad through and through, and Cyborg knows he's bad. Vigilante knows he's bad. Stryker knows he's bad. Everybody knows this is a bad dude.
Yeah. Sorry about that.
That's okay.
But no, this is really an issue of the law versus what justice is.
Yeah.
And that's sort of Vigilante's point.
Yeah, well, that's kind of like the dialogue it's almost like self-dialogue where Cyborg's talking about how he views the law versus how Vigilante, when they're separated, how they view the law. So you kind of have this argument going back and forth between these two characters. Is it up to the Vigilante to fulfill the law when the law fails? Or is it up to the Vigilante to bring in the guilty party so that the justice system can actually work? And if the justice system fails and you fix the justice system, you don't go kill the criminal. So it's kind of like playing the whole Vigilante notion against each other, and where Chase kind of ultimately is going to fall on this. Now, one thing that I felt after issue 2, I really thought at that point that Vigilante had decided that he wasn't going to kill people anymore. Right. But in this issue, it's very clear that he went for a kill shot on Stryker and just missed the target.
Yeah.
So, so I was kind of surprised. I was kind of surprised by that. So he doesn't actually, as far as I can tell, actually have a no-kill policy at this point.
Yeah. Well, that brings up something I wanted to go to on page 16. Again, this is sort of in the middle of the Cyborg Vigilante fight. And Chase says to him, "I haven't killed except in self-defense or in saving the lives of others."
Mm-hmm.
And he brings up the 3 mercenaries he killed back in the Titans annual that we talked about previously.
Right.
And I think if you break it down, that is true, because we have the villain pulling a gun on him at the last second and that kind of thing. And so he hasn't successfully killed anyone except in self-defense. But yeah, he definitely tried to kill Stryker in this issue.
Yep.
We assume he was going to kill Cord in the last issue. He just, found out he was wrong before he was able to do that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I hope the plot lines switch up a little bit, or I'll continue confusing villains in these stories.
Well, again, this isn't Batman where you have these really flamboyant design characters.
Yeah, I was sitting there honestly
other than Brand in the issue 1.
Yeah, I'm glad you pointed out my mistake there, Scott, because I was sitting there as I'm reading, I'm looking at the panel with Stryker with the tape recorder. I'm like, that doesn't look like that villain I was thinking of, and I'm like, forgot that was the other issue. But yeah, so yeah, you're right. I Vigilante really puts the anti in anti-hero, and I think maybe this is Wolfman's intention, but I'm not sure I even like Chase. I don't know that he or this character Vigilante, and maybe that's the intention. But if you can't like the protagonist of the stories, who can you like? So it's interesting.
That's the whole Walking Dead thing.
Well, or for me, that's just the Jessica Jones series on Netflix. It's all the characters surrounding her are great. I did not enjoy watching that character.
Yeah.
So yeah, no, I know exactly what you're saying.
And in today's lens, the justification is given. I mean, in the 80s, what Vigilante says to try to justify his actions are maybe acceptable. They may be thin, but they're probably more acceptable then. But today, holy cow, no way. This doesn't age quite that well. Of course, it's fiction, so okay. But I did like that this is a way of Wolfman exposing Chase's character flaws, and maybe makes him. It's a good representation of what would really happen if one of us decided to take the law into our own hands.
Yeah.
And it's also pretty evident that the wear and tear on Chase's psyche is real. This eternal tug of war between his obsessive sense of righteousness and then the guilt he feels of all the collateral damage that he's caused.
I don't know what it is with Wolfman, but he just has a thing for creating like vigilante characters. Because how many different just guys with guns has he already created for this series, and then for New Teen Titans? And then I was just reading an article this morning about a vigilante character that he created for Marvel called Copperhead, not the Luke Cage Copperhead. This is a guy who wore a copper suit of armor. He did this back in an issue of Daredevil. So I don't know. Wolfman just has an affinity, I guess, for this type of character. The regular guy with a gun who's out on some, mission or whatever to.
Well, again, it was also very in vogue at the time too. Early 80s. With the sort of Dirty Harry,
right.
kind of trend of the 70s, kind of going over into there. But yeah, like Vigilante definitely comes out of that sort of idea. That archetype of a character. Well, anything else? Any other closing thoughts on Vigilante for this time?
Do we?
I got to my notes.
We haven't done it so far, but are we going to rate these? You guys, we rated the first Batman: The Adventures Continue issues.
Oh yeah.
Well,
we can. It's pretty easy to rate them, like if we go back to the Batman story, I definitely think they went very fine for the first, pair of issues. And I think I'm still very fine for this. I like the idea. I wish these stories for Batman were a little bit more self-contained. It makes it with that maybe just a little bit of a plot that flows between issues. I think it's a great entry point for new readers to the character. But it'd be nice to be able to hand somebody a single issue and they get like a complete story like they can with the first two digital issues when that's got that physical print. This issue, these third and fourth parts digitally, you can't just hand somebody that issue and they have a complete story, So I really think these would be better geared that way than the Jason Todd can go through 3 or 4 actual physical issues. So that way the person who wants to read a little bit longer has something they can grasp onto to keep them interested. But I'd still would give it like a very fine for the Batman book.
Yeah, I'd go very fine with Batman too on that. Again, I think this will be a good read and trade, when it's all wrapped up. We got Paul Dini, Ty Templeton, Helen Burnett on here. We're getting good covers for, the chapters we talked about this time. It'll be issue 2. That's a Sean Murphy cover. It's really nice. We're getting good variants with these two. I think the only thing keeping me from giving this book a near mint is the fact that, the whole reason we're getting this series is to sell more action figures.
I'm okay with that if it's good.
Yeah, and that's the thing. I understand comics are a business. Not everybody kind of grasps that. But again, if these don't make money, we don't get any more of them.
Mm-hmm.
It's sort of a double-edged sword with the industry, as an art form in general. But yeah, I'm really enjoying it. I'm looking forward to, where we're going with this. I want to see how they fit Jason Todd into this universe. I know some people online I've seen are complaining about how this plays with the animated series timeline. I don't think it's anything that big of a deal, but I think there's probably just some nitpicky people out there who are taking issue with some things. But
okay, so if I can get over the contradictions with the DC proper universe, people that are trying to line this up with the animated universe timeline, they definitely need to get over it.
I mean, because that's a pretty loose continuity to begin with.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's very.
Comic books.
I'm gonna give it a very fine as well. Very enjoyable, and it's so accessible. And just keep, I look forward to the next issue. I like this the Jason Todd subplot that's running underneath it all, and I'm looking forward to see how he works himself into this story.
So all right, so Vigilante issue 2 then. Dan, you want to go first? Mike, you want to go first?
I'll go near mint on this one. Okay. This is really the issue that kind of intrigued me on this run as a whole, where we have the second issue where the character's already kind of questioning his methods and what he's doing here. I thought that was a really interesting take on this type of character. Again, we'll see where that goes over the course of this series, but yeah, that's one of the issues. Is the reason why I really wanted to do this in general. So,
Mike,
I'm gonna go fine, very fine. I just, even though I think it's an admirable effort to make a person like Cord sympathetic because he really was innocent of that first crime, it just seemed a little bit overwrought with some tropes that you expect from that timeline. And maybe I'm just being overly critical of the 80s. So
I feel like we're going to see a lot of 80s tropes over the course of this run.
Yeah, so I'd say that my grading is probably on a sliding scale, and it's going to change over time. So right now it's fine, very fine.
Well, I think to that though too, it's also we're reading this almost 40 years later. So I think we're definitely looking at it through modern eyes too. It's going to be part of that.
Right.
So.
I'd go fine plus on issue 2. You do have the situation where the hero's wrong. Then now he's got to deal with the issue of how is that going to impact the way he thinks. So so I'm at a fine plus on issue 2.
I'll say for number 3, I'll say very fine. I really like them bringing Cyborg into the story. I think yes, Wolfman knew what he was doing with that. New Teen Titans was like their best-selling book back then. I'm sure that's how Vigilante got made to begin with. He knows bringing Cyborg in, will definitely, get some readers on here, boost the sales of this issue. Again, I feel like, I would have gone higher with it if it weren't for the confusion about JJ and some of the timeline stuff they're doing here. But again, it's a good story. Again, further developing the anti-hero who doesn't kill, apparently, going forward. So, got some interesting stuff going on in this issue, I think.
I'm going to go ahead and say I actually like this issue 3 a little bit better. I'm going to give it a very fine. I mean, if I were just to judge give my grade because of whether or not I like Vigilante, it would be lower. But that's really what the author's trying to instill. It's kind of like saying Dallas wasn't a good TV show because I didn't like JR.
Yeah.
I think this is.
Do you want to explain that reference for some of our younger listeners?
Okay.
Who only know JR from the Simpsons parody?
Yeah. JR was the villain that everybody loved to hate. And yeah, and I am having mixed feelings about the Adrian Chase Vigilante, but it's being written well enough that I understand this is what the intention is, and this is just as human. This, like I said earlier, this is what would happen if one of us decided to go on some self-proclaimed rampage to instill justice in the world. And that doesn't make it right, but it shows the humanity of it. So, yeah, very fine for me.
Well, I'm going to go down to fine minus on this one. It's I guess to me the issue felt a little preachy. So there's like so much back and forth about which side is correct. Are they an extension of the law, or do they have to fix the broken law, or whatever. The other thing is this probably, after these, if I'd read these first 2 issues back when they first came out, I don't know that I would have picked up issue 3.
Yeah.
So I think if a book had been very fine or better, then yeah, that'd have been something that I would have picked up. Now at this point, Punisher was one of my favorite covers going back, our characters going back to the 80s, and I'm sure I would have directly compared him to the Punisher, and I wouldn't have even there'd been no comparison to me. I'd rather read a Punisher book over a Vigilante book anytime.
Right.
So.
Yeah, well, again, how far we're removed from this, I'm still kind of doing that. It's just that's what we're used to in comics. Punisher is that sort of vigilante anti-hero.
Yeah.
He is definitely the gold standard in the comics industry for that.
Mm-hmm. So and we decided this was before his 5-issue series, right?
I think so, yeah.
Because but so I had I'd spent time tracking down all those early Punisher appearances and reading all those. So I would definitely rather if I had to spend $1.25, I would have put that back and Yeah,
what was the regular price point at this point too? Because I know it wasn't $1.25 for stuff you're getting off the rack.
Well, I mean, it was probably 75 cents a buck. Yeah. Let me see if I can. Here, let me go. Let me look at.
I'd say it was. You're asking what normal comics, non-Baxter comics would be.
Yeah.
I'd say 75 cents.
That's probably what I was thinking.
Yeah, I'd say you're probably right.
But you're paying a premium 50 cents more for Vigilante back then.
And at the time you had the New Teen Titans, you had the Outsiders. You had what else was in the back? Oh, the Legion of Superheroes. I enjoyed all of those better than I enjoyed the Vigilante. The art and the enhancements that come with the Baxter paper.
Mm.
So it was worth 50 cents for me. I remember being so excited to get that New Teen Titans #1 Baxter series when it came out.
So I think next time that we talk about Vigilante, we'll be looking at issues 4 and 5 of that. If anybody wants to play along at home and maybe read up ahead of time.
We should go. I think we need to go a little farther than that. I think we need to go at least through the Exterminator storyline, and then in that 3 issues.
Well, we've got a couple after the next 2. We have a couple 2-issue storylines kind of back.
Okay.
So that's why I was thinking 4 and 5 next time, and then we can look at the others on their own.
All right. I was thinking that the Exterminator storyline ran several more than 2 issues.
No.
Okay. All right. That's fine then. Yeah.
So that'll kind of be our rough schedule for Vigilante right now. And again, I don't think that'll be on the next episode, because next episode I think is going to be our previews episode. So this
is episode 70. So 71 will be previews. 72 will be where we get back to Vigilante and whatever else.
Unless something crazy happens in between then and now that we have to talk about.
Right.
But that's the plan right now going forward. So I think that's it for this time. You guys have anything else you want to bring up?
I think that's it.
Now? Okay. Yeah, just let everybody know, you can come by Campus Comics. We are open right now. We just ask everyone to just, wear a mask, kind of practice social distancing for right now. As everything tries to go back to normal. Again, we're at 816 East Main Street, Suite B in Carbondale. Our phone number is 618-457-6011, or you can find us on Facebook or Twitter. Again, I'm Dan. I'm there most Saturdays. You can find me online at Detective651 on Twitter and Instagram, or on my TeePublic store. Scott, where can everybody find you?
Scott Reed, burgcomics.com, burgcomics.com, and there you'll have links to my Instagram, Facebook, eBay store, email address, all the good stuff.
Mike, where can people stalk you online if they're so inclined, or if someone has a mission of vengeance they decide you are prime target for?
I think I'm going to give my mailing address. No, it's the best social media way to contact is Mike Atchison 5.
Okay.
We're going to start the Mike Atchison fan page.
That's right.
on Facebook.
Where all your buddies can find you.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I think that's it for this time. Thanks for listening and putting up with our nonsense for another episode, and we'll see you next time.
We're going to start the Mike Atchison fan page.